I'm modifying my reflection slightly, only to emphasize that what we heard today, truth matters. Truth matters. And we need open lines of communication and information so that truth can be heard. I am currently in the midst of reading a new book called Dangerous Ideas, A Brief History of Censorship in the West from the Ancients to Fake News by Eric Berkowitz, a very important book. And I want to frame briefly my reflection in the context that in different ways we have heard about forms of censorship when it comes to debating Israel, and that debate being shut down by the accusation of anti-Semitism, as if criticism of a government and a regime can be labeled anti-Semitism, and then that is used to shut down debate. And that's a form of censorship. We're seeing censorship of the BDS movement in state laws and actions to close down that discussion. On college campuses, we see the debate over Palestinian rights being shut down. Each in its own ways, these are forms of censorship. The book is called Dangerous Ideas because ideas are dangerous to those in power. Ideas are dangerous to those who would explore alternatives. The excerpts I had intended to mention began with some of the earliest forms of censorship. The first emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, from 259 to 10 BC, not only burned books, but burned and buried people. And Heinrich Heine in Germany, long before the rise of Hitler, spoke of first they will burn books, then they will burn people. So there is a long history to censorship, which I will streamline for the sake of time right now. Quoting from this book, the compulsion to silence others is as old as the urge to speak, because speech, words, images, expression itself exerts power. Many in the Judeo-Christian tradition believe that the world was created with words and that words can also cause its destruction. Speech influences people's hearts and minds and affects their actions. Indeed, in many ways, speech is action. Dissent disturbs, and those who rattle norms often do so in obnoxious ways. It takes a lot of self-possession to endure jarring ideas that call one's beliefs into question. And most of us are inclined to suppress opposition. For governing authorities, tolerating speech that challenges the status quo implies approval of that challenge, which in turn subverts the myths on which their power is based. If such speech goes unpunished, others are encouraged to follow, and society's stability can be put at risk. This is from the authoritarian viewpoint. Even in countries where free expression is cherished, we often forget that foregoing censorship requires the embrace of discord as a fair price for the general good. Tolerance is risky. Suppression, on the other hand, is logical, and across history it has been the norm. This is the paradox. Censorship violates our natural rights, yet it has always been a pervasive element of social reality in the psyches of individuals and no less than in dictators. The US Supreme Court correctly recognizes that those who begin coercive elimination of dissent soon find themselves exterminating dissenters. But the point I want to reach today, which is a difficult point for many of us on the left, is that many on the left have come to look to government to impose censorship against pornography and sexism, against racism, hate, and otherwise offensive speech, against fake news, and against the excesses of the wealthy and of industry, says this book. The Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates Jr. found it difficult to imagine such an agenda being pushed by these leftists. Activist counterparts in the 60s who defined themselves through their adversarial relationships to authority and to institution. Now, writes Gates, the aim is not to resist power, but to enlist power. And I will conclude for myself by saying that we must see that full, robust, and open free speech is the friend of movements for liberation and for equality and for justice, and that we should not fall into the trap of seeking on campuses to impose speech codes or in the wider society to impose restrictions on free speech, even if that's a bitter pill and difficult to take.